Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to be using the stamp set that came in Simon Says Stamps August card kit. So I have a piece of Bristol smooth paper in my MISTI, and I'm going to be stamping a bunch of the different floral images with some Versamark ink. And I did prep this paper with my powder tool before I stamped so that none of the embossing powder that I'm about to use will stick to any of the paper in areas other than where I stamped. I used a white embossing powder for this, so you're not going to be able to see it too well until I start coloring. I'm going to be using my Arteza Real Brush Pens for the coloring today. The first color that I picked out is the Elephant Gray, and I'm going to be using this on that can metal style vase. When I first started coloring, I forgot to zoom my camera in, but I do realize it pretty quickly, and I zoom in when I realize it. I know that I've been using my Arteza markers a lot lately, and that's just because I have a lot of Arteza markers and I find them pretty easy to color with. I don't have a lot of Copics. I'm fairly new to Copics, but I assume that eventually once I have a bigger collection of them, I'll use them more often. But the Arteza markers are just my go-to coloring medium right now. This green color that I picked out for the leaves is the light green color. This coloring took quite a while, so I did have to speed this up quite a bit. Right here is where I realized that the camera wasn't zoomed in, so I stopped and zoomed it in real quick before I moved on. This pink that I'm using for the larger flower is the fuchsia color. Normally with a flower, I would add the color to the base of the petals and then blend it out, but because this flower is so intricate, it would have taken me forever to do that, so I just kind of dabbed color wherever, wasn't too careful about it, and then I blended it out. For the next flower, I chose the color Honey. And again, I wasn't too careful with where I put that color. I just put it in the middle and then blended it out. This is very relaxed, easygoing coloring. To finish up this image, I came back in with all of the same colors and just deepened up my shadows. For the next image, I started with the color Arctic Blue. I used this color for the jar that the flowers are sitting in. I wanted to make this jar look like a glass jar, and I was a little bit nervous about it. I didn't know how the coloring was going to go, but in the end I think that it came out pretty well, and I think it conveys what I wanted it to. I think that you can tell that it's supposed to be a glass jar. I used the blue to shade the edges, and then I also shaded the shape of the rim on the bottom so that you could see that it's see-through and you can see the bottom through the glass. And while I was coloring, I made sure to use curved strokes with my brush to create the illusion that the jar is round. And this is something that I also did with the vase in the previous image, and I'm going to do with the pot in the last image. For the flowers in this vase, I used the same pink and yellow colors from the first image, and then I'm also going to be using a purple color. I chose Orchid Purple for this last flower. I started coloring the leaves in with the same green that I used in the first one, but then to change it up, I decided to add some shadows with turtle green. And I just added a very light amount of that. It's a very dark color, so you don't need a whole lot. A little bit goes a long way. Next, I wanted to work on my jar a little bit more. So I took this color, Ocean Blue, and I scribbled it onto my block a little bit so that I could pick it up with a paintbrush. I thought it would be better to use the paintbrush so that I could have some softer brush strokes instead of the kind of harder lines of drawing directly onto the paper. I used this color mostly on the sides and the bottom, leaving the middle part really light. Moving on to the third image, I pulled out the apricot color. This third bunch of flowers is in a pot, and it really reminded me of one of those terracotta pots, so that's the color that I'm trying to go for here. I'm sorry if you hear any noise in the background. I live on kind of a major road, and because I have the air conditioner in the window, I can really hear like everything going on outside, and the cars are being particularly loud tonight. Anyways, after I did that apricot color, I came in with this autumn red color and just kind of really deepened up the shadows. And also I think that this really added the brown color that I was looking for. Oh, there was a really loud car. This really added the brown that I was looking for that terracotta color. For this first flower in this third image, I'm using the same color purple that I used in the last bunch of flowers. I tried to use a lot of the same colors with these 3 images so that they all really go together. So like I said, I used the same purple for this flower that I used in the previous image, and I also used the same yellow, and I'm going to be using the same greens, the same pink, and I'm actually going to add some more of that yellow. For this image, there are a couple different sizes of leaves. There are some really big leaves, and then there's also some really tiny leaves. So for the really big leaves, I decided to use the light green color, and then for the smaller leaves, I used that turtle green color. This bunch of flowers had a lot going on in it, and it was a little bit difficult to color with the lines being white because I couldn't see them very well, but I just actually looked at the stamp to kind of get an idea of where everything was and what needed to be colored. Okay, so 2 of these images have these kind of stick twig things coming off of them, and I didn't want to leave them without any color because they're just white and you wouldn't be able to see them, and I'm going to be cutting this out, and if I left them just white, I would end up probably just cutting them off. So instead of doing that, I decided to kind of just add a little color around them. So I took this spearmint blue and just kind of colored them in to turn them into some leafy things. And then I took this teal color to do some shadows, and I just added a very, very small amount of that to the centers. And then I had these little leafy things. Okay, so almost done with the coloring now. Next, I took this mint green color and I added some stems to those flowers that are in the jar. Because it's a clear jar, you would see the stems, so I wanted to add some stems. And then I also took this ice blue color and I added stems with that too, so that I'd have some variation in the color of stems that are in the jar. And then I took my white gel pen and I added some highlights on the jar and on the metal vase. Okay, whew, now all the coloring is done. That took a long time. That was a lot of coloring. Now I have a piece of 6x6 Canson watercolor paper, and I drew some guidelines for my painter's tape so that I could make sure that my painter's tape was really straight. I have my painter's tape placed so that the edges are covering up those pencil lines. You want the pencil lines to be covered by the painter's tape because if you paint over pencil lines, you can't erase them, and I want to be able to erase my pencil lines when I'm done painting. For the painting that I'm doing right now, I took the Elephant Gray Arteza marker and I scribbled it onto my palette, and that palette is actually just a piece of laminated cardstock. And then I took my paintbrush and I picked up the Arteza marker off of the palette and I'm painting it onto my Canson watercolor paper. The look that I was going for with this was a very clean wash of that gray color and very light. Once that first layer of paint was dry, I added some of the gray color to my block and flicked it off with a paintbrush to get some splatters. But I actually kind of dripped a bunch of water in that corner down there. You'll see I'm trying to fix it right now with my heat tool and paintbrush. And that just kind of ruined the whole clean wash of color look that I was going for. So scratch that, plan B. I'm going to make this a messy watercolor look. So I added more color and I kept going over it until I was happy with it. And you know, it wasn't the original plan, but I ended up really liking the way that it looked, so it all works in the end. Once it was completely dry, I took the painter's tape off and then I erased all of those pencil lines. I did cut this piece down a little bit because it was 6x6, but my card base is 6x6 and I wanted a little bit of a border, so I just cut around the edges a little bit. I think I did a 1/4 inch off of each side. So I popped up that watercolor panel with some foam tape onto my card base, and now I'm popping up the floral images with some foam tape right onto that square that I painted in the middle. For the sentiment, I chose a stamp from the same stamp set as the flowers, which says "With Love," and I stamped it onto some vellum with Versamark ink, and then I heat embossed it with a white embossing powder. Now, I love the look of a white heat embossed sentiment on a piece of vellum, but I think it's a pain in the butt to hide the adhesive when you're trying to actually adhere it onto your card. And I can't stand seeing your adhesive through the vellum, so I have to hide it. So that's why I don't do it very often, because I find it kind of difficult. But I did find a way to adhere this without the adhesive showing. It was a pain, but I did it. In order to adhere this, I folded the left edge of that sentiment strip around the back side of the watercolor panel, and then I adhered it to the back of that panel. I then took a paintbrush with some Tombow glue on it and added just some dabs of that Tombow glue underneath some of the flowers where I knew that vellum was going to hit, and then I adhered the vellum and it all worked out. For the finishing touches on this card, I added a few different sizes of clear sequins with my Tombow glue. Then I took out my glossy accents and added a dot to the center of each of those sequins, and then this card was all done. Thank you for watching today. I hope you really enjoyed this floral card using the August Simon Says Stamp Card Kit. All of the supplies that I used today can be found in the description down below. If you enjoyed watching and you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button so that you can see all of my future videos. I'm going to be back with a new video on Monday. Again, thank you for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a great weekend.